Donald Trump had always been a man of paradoxes, larger than life and yet, at times, deeply introspective. After his tenure in the White House, he found himself yearning for a different perspective, one far removed from the gold-plated interiors of his penthouses or the grandeur of his rallies. He wanted to see the world as the invisible saw it, the downtrodden, the overlooked, the ones whose voices were drowned out by the cacophony of modern society. And so, in a move as bold as any of his political ventures, he decided to step out of his well-heeled world and into theirs. The transformation was striking. Gone were the signature navy suits, the silk ties, and the perfectly coiffed blonde hair. In their place were worn-out jeans that hung loosely on his frame, a faded jacket with frayed cuffs, and an old baseball cap that shaded his face. His hair, usually a topic of media obsession, was hidden beneath the cap, and his face was adorned with a scruffy, uneven beard that lent an air of ruggedness. He carried a shabby cloth bag over his shoulder, the kind that might hold a few meager possessions. It was a disguise so thorough that even those closest to him might have struggled to recognize him. His destination was an upscale cafe nestled in the heart of a bustling city district, a place where appearances were everything. It was the kind of cafe that prided itself on aesthetic perfection, from the meticulously plated avocado toast to the gleaming espresso machines behind the marble counter. The clientele mirrored the ambience: sharp-suited professionals, chic young creatives, and affluent families, all immersed in their own curated bubbles of privilege. Trump had chosen this cafe for its stark contrast to his new appearance. He wanted to test the limits of kindness or indifference among those who had every reason to ignore a man who seemed to have nothing. As he approached the cafe, he took a moment to observe the scene through the glass. Inside, polished customers sipped on frothy lattes and clinked spoons against delicate porcelain cups. Conversations flowed over marble-topped tables, punctuated by the soft tapping of fingers on keyboards. The lighting was warm and modern, casting a golden glow over the sleek leather chairs and minimalist decor. It was a scene of effortless elegance, a world away from the rough exterior he now wore. When he walked into the cafe, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. Conversations stuttered, forks paused mid-air, and the faint hum of polite chatter dipped into an awkward silence. Eyes flickered toward him briefly, only to dart away just as quickly, as if prolonged eye contact might make the situation more real. The man's appearance, rumpled clothes, a scruffy beard, and a tattered bag slung over his shoulder, stood out sharply against the polished decor and the neatly dressed patrons sipping their artisan lattes. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't let it show. His steps were slow but deliberate, the squeak of his worn shoes against the cafe's pristine tiled floor cutting through the uneasy quiet. The space, filled just moments ago with warmth and laughter, now felt colder, as if his presence had drawn something intangible from the air. Emily, a young waitress balancing 2 trays of orders, caught sight of him out of the corner of her eye. Her cheerful expression faltered, replaced by a look of mild irritation. She pressed her lips together, focusing on her tasks, but her sidelong glances gave her away. She didn't like what she was seeing. Behind the counter, Jack, the manager, leaned casually against the espresso machine, arms crossed. His sharp, calculating eyes tracked the man's every move like a hawk surveying its prey. Jack nudged one of the baristas standing nearby, muttering under his breath, "Keep an eye on him. Last thing we need is a scene in here." The barista nodded quickly, glancing nervously toward the man as he approached the counter. Trump, unfazed, stepped forward. His pace was unhurried, his demeanor calm. When he reached the counter, he stood silently for a moment, his rough hand resting lightly on the edge, as he waited for someone to acknowledge him. Emily, now stacking cups behind the register, hesitated before letting out a soft sigh. Turning toward him, she tilted her head with practiced indifference. "What can I get for you?" she asked, her tone clipped and professional, though it lacked the warmth she reserved for her regular customers. "A small coffee," he replied, his voice steady but quiet, with a deliberate calmness that made the moment stretch just a little longer. Emily's fingers hovered over the register, her eyes sweeping over him again, as if reassessing her initial judgment. After a beat, she punched in the order. "That'll be $3, she said flatly, barely glancing up at him. Without a word, Trump reached into his bag. The worn fabric crinkled softly as he pulled out a handful of coins, placing them on the counter with a faint clink that somehow seemed louder than it should have. Several nearby patrons turned their heads, their curiosity piqued by the sound. He began counting the coins slowly, methodically, pushing each one toward her with care. By the time he finished, a small pile of quarters, dimes, and pennies sat on the counter. Emily swept the coins into her hand, her face betraying nothing as she quickly counted them. Her lips tightened, and with a loud sigh, she dropped the coins back onto the counter. "This isn't enough," she said, her voice louder now, drawing more attention from the room. The murmurs started immediately, low whispers spreading like ripples in a pond. "What's he even doing here?" a man in a crisp navy suit muttered, leaning toward his companion. "Probably thought he could get something for free," a woman at the next table added, her voice tinged with disdain. Emily folded her arms, her irritation now plain. "If you can't pay," she said sharply, "you're going to need to leave." At that moment, Jack stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the floor as he moved toward the counter. His expression was firm, his jaw set in the way managers often did when trying to project authority. "Sir," Jack began, his voice low and measured, "if you can't afford to pay, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a business, not a shelter." The tension in the room became almost palpable. The occasional clink of a spoon against a cup or the low hum of the espresso machine seemed deafening in the silence. All eyes were on Trump now, waiting for his response. He remained still, his hand resting lightly on the counter. His gaze shifted from Jack to Emily and then out toward the room, where curious stares and judgmental whispers lingered in the air. He didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, even as the weight of their disdain pressed against him. For a moment, it seemed as though he might speak, but before he could, another voice cut through the thick tension, clear and unwavering. It was a voice that carried with it something rare, a quiet strength, steady and unyielding. And just like that, the uneasy silence in the cafe shattered, replaced by something entirely unexpected. "I'll cover it," a calm, confident voice said, cutting through the growing tension in the room. The soft murmur of whispers halted. Heads turned sharply toward the corner of the cafe, where the voice had come from. It belonged to Maggie, a young woman seated by the window, a well-worn paperback resting in her hands. Maggie was a familiar face in the cafe, the kind of regular who came not for conversation, but for the quiet comfort of a good book. Her simple cardigan, worn jeans, and scuffed boots didn't draw much attention most days. But now, under the curious gaze of the entire room, she stood out. She didn't flinch under the weight of their stares. Gently closing her book, she set it on the table and rose from her seat, her movements deliberate and calm. The slight scrape of her chair against the tiled floor was the only sound in the cafe as she reached for her wallet, slipping it into her hand as she walked toward the counter. The silence was quickly replaced by hushed murmurs. "What's she doing?" a man near the front muttered to his friend. "Is she serious? She doesn't even know him," came another voice, tinged with disbelief. Maggie ignored the whispers entirely. She moved with quiet purpose, her steps steady and her expression unbothered. Reaching the counter, she pulled out 3 crisp dollar bills and placed them on the counter, smoothing them with her fingers. Emily, the waitress, hesitated, her mouth opening slightly as if to object. But Maggie spoke first. "Everyone deserves kindness," Maggie said, her voice warm and steady, cutting through the lingering awkwardness like a bomb. "A cup of coffee isn't much, but sometimes it can mean everything." Her words carried a weight that seemed to ripple through the room. For a moment, even the air felt lighter. Emily blinked, her irritation momentarily replaced by surprise. She glanced back at Jack, the manager, who was standing behind her with his arms crossed. He gave a small shrug, followed by a reluctant nod. With a huff, Emily took the money, punched the order into the register, and grabbed a cup from the counter. Trump stood quietly, watching the scene unfold. When Emily handed him the coffee, he accepted it with both hands, cradling it as if it were the most precious thing he'd ever been given. "Thank you," he said, his voice low but thick with sincerity. He looked directly at Maggie, his piercing blue eyes softening. "You've done more than you realize." Maggie tilted her head slightly, studying him for a brief moment. There was something in the way he spoke, measured, deliberate, as if each word carried a deeper meaning. But she didn't press. Instead, she offered him a small smile, one that seemed to carry more warmth than all the hushed words in the room combined. Trump nodded at her once more before turning toward the door. The room buzzed faintly with quiet speculation as he walked away. Some customers exchanged guilty glances, while others avoided looking at him altogether, their discomfort palpable. As Trump neared the door, he paused briefly by Maggie's table. Reaching into the pocket of his jacket, he pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. With deliberate care, he placed it on the edge of the table, aligning it neatly next to her book. Then, without a word, he straightened his posture and stepped out into the busy street beyond. The sound of the door closing brought the cafe back to life, but the atmosphere remained subdued. Maggie lingered at the counter for a moment, her gaze fixed on the door as if replaying the strange interaction in her mind. The folded paper remained unnoticed on her table, a quiet mystery amidst the return of clinking cups and soft chatter. Emily stole a glance at Jack, who gave her a knowing shrug. "Let it go," his eyes seemed to say. But Maggie's thoughtful expression remained, the corners of her lips slightly upturned, as if she could sense there was more to this moment than anyone else could see. The paper fluttered faintly in the breeze, its message waiting patiently to be discovered. 2 days later, the cafe staff found themselves caught in the kind of moment that shifts the course of ordinary days forever. It began mid-morning, just as the place hummed with its usual rhythm of espresso shots and soft laughter. The glass door swung open, and a courier stepped inside, clutching an envelope that was anything but ordinary, cream-colored, crisp, and bearing an unmistakable air of importance. It had a certain weight to it, both literal and symbolic. The courier paused at the counter, scanning the cafe until his gaze landed on Jack, the manager. "Delivery for you," the courier said, handing over the envelope with Jack's name written neatly on the front in an elegant hand. Jack took it, eyebrows knitting in mild confusion. The envelope felt heavy in his hands, the quality of the paper a stark contrast to the bustling casualness of the cafe. The staff, baristas, waiters, and even Emily, who was wiping down tables, stopped to watch, their curiosity pulling them toward the mystery like moths to a flame. Carefully, Jack slid his finger under the seal and opened it. Inside were 2 items, a folded letter written on thick, expensive stationery and what appeared to be a check. As he unfolded the letter, his eyes darted to the signature on the check, and suddenly, He froze, his face drained of color as if all the oxygen in the room had vanished. For a moment, Jack could only stare, his hands trembling slightly as he held the check. Then he whispered, almost inaudibly, "Donald J. Trump." The name landed in the room like a thunderclap. A hush fell over the cafe, so complete that even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to dim. Emily's mouth hung open, her rag forgotten in her hand, while one of the other baristas muttered under their breath, "No way, no freaking way." Jack, still in shock, unfolded the letter and cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice as he began to read aloud. "Kindness is a choice, and it speaks volumes about who we are. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know how your actions might shape your future. Let this be a lesson and an opportunity for growth." The words seemed to echo, filling the space with something weightier than silence. The staff stood frozen, exchanging nervous glances as the meaning sank in. Emily stepped closer, peering over Jack's shoulder at the check. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she took in the amount, an eye-watering sum, far beyond anything they could have expected. Her voice came out in a shaky whisper, barely audible. "Oh my God, the homeless guy. That was him, wasn't it?" Jack's legs gave out, and he sank onto the nearest stool. He stared at the check and letter as if they might vanish into thin air. The commanding, unshakable presence he normally exuded was replaced with something raw and unguarded. Shame. Quietly, he murmured, "We treated him like garbage, like he didn't even matter." The staff broke into hushed murmurs, a nervous buzz rippling through the cafe. Each voice carried a fragment of realization, piecing together the events of that day when the scruffy man with the worn-out jacket had walked into their pristine cafe. Someone in the back whispered, "He sat in the corner, didn't he? We ignored him, made jokes about him." Emily's face grew hot as she remembered herself giggling at the man's awkward attempt to order coffee. She glanced around, noticing the same expression of guilt mirrored on the faces of her coworkers. One customer, overhearing the commotion, leaned in and said softly, "You mean the guy we thought didn't belong here? That was him?" Jack nodded slowly, still staring at the check. The weight of it all, the money, the lesson, the man behind the disguise, seemed almost too much to bear. At that moment, the cafe wasn't just a place for lattes and pastries anymore. It became a room full of unspoken truths, regrets, and the heavy realization that they had missed their chance to treat someone with dignity, all because of appearances. Outside, the city buzzed along as usual, unaware of the small but profound reckoning taking place inside, while the cafe staff grappled with the shock of their discovery. Maggie, the young woman whose kindness had been the heart of the story, was about to experience her own surprise. That afternoon, as she returned to her modest apartment, she found an envelope waiting for her in the mailbox. It wasn't just any envelope. The paper was thick, the seal unmistakable, the emblem of Donald Trump's office. Maggie's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a short note and a formal invitation, written in the same handwriting she had seen on the cafe's letter. Her heart pounded as she read it. She was being invited to meet Donald Trump. Why would someone like him want to meet me? She wondered aloud, her voice a mix of nervousness and disbelief. The day of the meeting arrived quickly, and Maggie dressed simply, opting for a modest dress and her favorite necklace, a small pendant that had belonged to her late mother. She wanted to look her best without being flashy. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the grand building where the meeting was scheduled. When she was ushered into Trump's office, the man she had helped in the cafe was barely recognizable. Gone were the tattered clothes and scruffy beard. Trump, now back in his familiar sharp suit, stood and extended his hand, his smile warm and genuine. "Maggie," he said, his voice rich with gratitude, It's wonderful to see you again. Maggie shook his hand, still trying to process the surreal moment. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice almost a whisper. You don't need to say anything, Trump replied, gesturing for her to sit across from him. I just wanted to thank you in person. In a moment when so many chose judgment, you chose kindness. That's rare, and it's powerful. Maggie's eyes filled with tears as she listened. She thought back to that day in the cafe, how natural it had felt to step in, to pay for the man's coffee. It hadn't seemed like a big deal at the time, but now, sitting here, she realized just how much it had meant. Trump leaned forward slightly, his tone serious but kind. Your simple act of generosity reminded me of something I've always believed, that even the smallest gestures can create ripples far greater than we'll ever know. You didn't know who I was, and it didn't matter. What mattered was that you saw someone in need, and you acted. That kind of character, it's rare, and it's invaluable. Then came the moment that left Maggie utterly speechless. Trump reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Opening it, he slid the contents across the desk toward her. Inside was a document outlining a full scholarship to any college of her choice, if she preferred. The funds could also be used to pursue a personal dream or project close to her heart. Maggie's hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Trump leaned back, his smile soft but genuine. You already have. Maggie, that day in the cafe, you reminded me, and everyone else in that room, that kindness still exists in this world. This is my way of paying it forward. Maggie sat there for a moment, overwhelmed. She thought about the path her life had taken, the struggle she'd faced, and how one simple decision to step up and help someone had brought her here. Little did she know, this meeting was just the beginning. What she had done in that cafe was more than a small gesture. It was the spark of a story that would inspire countless others. The story of Trump's social experiment and Maggie's extraordinary kindness spread like wildfire, capturing the hearts of people across the nation. News outlets, social media platforms, and everyday conversations were abuzz with the tale of a homeless man, a humble college student, and an unexpected twist involving one of the most recognizable figures in the world. The cafe, once just another trendy coffee spot in the city, became a beacon of change. Customers who had been present that day returned with different attitudes, humbled by the lesson they had witnessed. Jack and Emily, deeply affected by their roles in the story, publicly promised to treat every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of their appearance or circumstances. They implemented new policies at the cafe, ensuring that kindness and inclusivity were at the heart of their service. As for Maggie, her small but selfless act of generosity turned her into a symbol of hope. People across the country were inspired by her courage to stand up for someone in need. Even when it wasn't the easy or popular thing to do, strangers reached out to share how her story had encouraged them to choose kindness in their own lives. Maggie never sought fame, but her quiet strength and compassion resonated far beyond what she could have imagined. And Trump? He returned to his life. Content that his experiment had revealed a simple yet profound truth. Even the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that change the lives of many. The experience reminded him, and the world, that the measure of a person is not in their wealth or status, but in how they treat others, especially those who seem to have nothing. This story is more than just a tale of a surprising encounter. It's a reminder of the power we hold in every moment to choose empathy over judgment, generosity over indifference. Maggie's act didn't require wealth, influence, or grand gestures. It required only a heart willing to see humanity where others saw inconvenience. In a world that often values appearances over authenticity, it's the quiet acts of kindness that shine the brightest. You may never know the impact of your actions, but that doesn't make them any less important. Kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change someone's day or their life. So, the next time you encounter someone who seems invisible to the world, ask yourself this: what kind of ripple will I create today? Dear friends, seekers of truth, and bearers of hope, in a world filled with noise, fleeting moments, and distractions, there is something uniquely powerful about coming together in a space where purpose, kindness, and connection thrive. You are here not by chance, but by design. Each of us has been called to this moment, to this channel, because we share a common desire to create something meaningful, something that transcends the ordinary and touches the lives of others. Here, we are building more than a channel. We are creating a movement, a gathering place where stories of courage, kindness, and transformation are shared and celebrated. This is a community where every like, every subscription, and every comment has the power to uplift not just one person, but countless others. You see, this mission isn't about one voice, it's about all of us. Every one of us has a story, a unique light to share, and a role to play in spreading hope. That's why I invite you to do more than just watch or listen. I invite you to be part of this movement. Hit that like button to show that you believe in the power of kindness and connection. Subscribe to stand with us as we create more stories, more messages, and more moments that matter. Share your story in the comments, your journey, your thoughts, or even a small act of kindness you've experienced. You never know who might read it and feel inspired. Together, we can create a space where no one feels alone, where everyone's voice is valued, and where hope flows freely. When you share this video or your own story in the comments, you're doing more than engaging with content. You're extending a lifeline to someone who might desperately need it. Imagine this: someone, somewhere, scrolling through their feed, tired, discouraged, or searching for something they can't quite name. They stumble across this video or your story, and suddenly, they're reminded that they're not alone. Your simple act of sharing could be the spark that reignites their belief in the goodness of people. This is how movements grow. It starts with one story, one click, one comment, and before you know it, ripples turn into waves, and waves become unstoppable forces of change. Think of the comment section not as a place for fleeting words, but as a sacred space where we connect. When you share your thoughts, you're inviting someone into your world. You're saying, "This is what I've experienced. This is what I've learned. Maybe it can help you too." Your story matters. Your voice matters. Whether it's a memory of a time when kindness changed your life, a lesson you've learned on your journey, or even just a simple word of encouragement, it matters. Drop it in the comments and watch how your words resonate with others. This isn't just about a channel, it's about building a brighter world. When you hit like, you amplify a message of kindness. When you subscribe, you strengthen a community of light. When you comment, you connect with others in ways that are deeper and more profound than you may realize. And when you share, you become a messenger, carrying hope into the lives of people you may never meet, but whose hearts you will touch. It's a simple act, but its impact is limitless. Imagine what we can accomplish together. Picture a world where every person feels seen, heard, and valued. A world where kindness isn't just a rare gesture, but a daily practice. A world where we build each other up instead of tearing each other down. This is the vision we're working toward. And it starts here, with us, with you. So I ask you, will you join us? Will you take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share your story in the comments? Will you help us spread this message far and wide, so that it reaches the hearts that need it most? This is your moment. This is your chance to be part of something extraordinary. Click like to say, "I believe in this mission." Hit subscribe to declare, "I'm here for the journey." and share your story in the comments to say, "I'm part of this community." Let your light shine. Let your voice be heard. And let's show the world that kindness, connection, and hope still have the power to change lives. Together, we can make a difference. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. Let's build this community of light, one story, one action, one heart at a time. We're waiting to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below, and let's inspire one another.